Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the 2019 Hope for the Holidays webinar. We are so grateful that you have tuned in and are considering or have already committed to sharing words of hope this holiday season with families who are in immigration detention. My name is Sue Ellen Spotts. I'm the manager for congregational outreach at Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. I'm happy to see that we have close to 100 attendees listening, and I encourage you to share the recording of this webinar with others in your congregations and your other networks of people who share compassion for migrants and refugees. The purpose of this webinar is to give an overview of the current state of immigration legislation in the U.S. and provide resources for taking action, especially for sharing hope this holiday season. Legislators are currently in their districts through October 14th, and it's important that they hear their constituents want to welcome and protect migrants and refugees. Both houses will be back in session next Tuesday, October 15th. We have a very knowledgeable group of panelists that will report on current statistics and policy updates related to migrants and asylum seekers, and especially the effects on children. We will also be explaining the purpose of Hope for the Holidays, who benefits, how to participate, and we will take a moment to give thanks for the impact of last year's campaign. A couple of logistics before we get started. If you are having trouble hearing the audio from your computer, you can also dial in to the number you see on the screen and hear the audio through your phone. We are recording this webinar, and we will make it available to everyone who has sent an RSVP. If you did not RSVP, you can send us your email using the chat tool, and we will send the recording to you that way. All attendees are muted. We have a lot of people on the call, so muting everyone will help us maximize sound quality. We will have a question and answer segment toward the end of the webinar. You can ask questions using the chat function at any time during the webinar, and the questions are already coming. When we get to the question and answer portion of the webinar, we'll group similar questions and respond to them. If we run out of time and don't get to your questions, we will respond through email within 24 hours. I'll very briefly go over the agenda for today's webinar. We'll start with an opening prayer. We will have current statistics and a policy update. We'll give the overview of Hope for the Holidays, and then we will have some stories shared from last year. Finally, Whitney will describe the process of getting involved. During the last 15 minutes of the webinar, we will respond to the questions that you've submitted via the chat room. We know that we gather in love of God and by God's grace. So I'm going to ask Gail Battle, our annual giving manager at LIRS, to call us together with a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Holy God, as we approach the day filled with family, festivities, and feasting, we are aware that some will feel separation and heartbreak this Christmas. We pray for the immigrant detainees, many of whom fled inhumane injustices and find themselves trapped. May we bring light to those who dwell in darkness. May we bring up those who are brought down. May we help open the eyes of those who do not see the human sufferings before them. In Christ's name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Gail. Now we're going to hear from Hillary Kipnis. Hillary is Migrant Children and Families Advocacy Officer at LIRS. She is part of our advocacy staff and will paint a picture for us of the situation of asylum at the southern border and the upcoming proposals from the administration that will directly impact children.
Good afternoon, everybody. As was mentioned, my name is Hillary Kipnis, and I'm the Migrant Children and Families Advocacy Officer for LIRS, and I'm also an attorney. And so I'm just going to give you an overview of what's going on at the southern border and some recent and some not so recent policies and rules that have been passed by the administration that impact children and families and asylees and also touch upon particularly how recent studies about children in detention and look at the future as to what has been proposed and reported on as far as what's up and coming in terms of administrative moves against children. So to begin with, actually today, the acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner, Mark Morgan, has announced that in fiscal year 19, nearly 1 million individuals have attempted to cross through our southern border. This is 88% increase from fiscal year 2018. The numbers, however, have started to decline. In September, there were 52,000 who attempted to cross the border, and this is a significant decline. It's a 65% drop from May. In May, there were 144,000 individuals who crossed our southern border. So this is the fourth month of decline in individuals that CBP has encountered. There are a lot of factors that relate to why the numbers have dropped. There's obviously a seasonal element to this, but the most concerning is the cumulative effect that numerous policies and regulations have had on border crossers. In particular, I'm going to touch upon three of the most significant policies and regulations. The first was back in November 9th, 2018, and it was when the DHS and DOJ issued an interim final rule, which related to individuals seeking asylum and entered between ports of entry and barring them from seeking asylum. Then we have also in play at the border, we have what's officially called migrant protection protocols. However, it is typically and more aptly referred to as Remain in Mexico. It is a policy that the Department of Homeland Security announced in January of this year. Well, actually, they announced it end of December, but it went into effect end of January, specifically January 24th, 2019. And this policy forces individuals who arrive at the southern border fleeing violence and persecution in their home countries to remain in Mexico pending their asylum hearing before an immigration judge. Currently, 51,000 individuals have been returned to Mexico since the policy was launched end of January. Mexico is ill-equipped to handle this inflow, as is reflected by the numerous reports from migrants who have been returned, who have been subjected to extortion, violence, kidnapping, because smugglers, criminals, human traffickers, they understand that they have somebody waiting for them across the border, and so that they're in an extremely vulnerable position as they're along the border waiting to enter to apply for asylum. And so the criminals, human traffickers, smugglers are taking advantage and exploiting these individuals. A more recent development, along with Remain in Mexico, has been the launch of tent courts. These courts are not for the public to attend, although all courts should be available for public viewing. However, these courts specifically have been designed in such a way that any advocate or individual wishing to view the court proceedings is being denied entry. Typically what's happening is that judges are telecasting themselves, so they're not actually along the border, but they have video and they're Skyped in or through some sort of video link, they're conducting trials. So that's with the Remain in Mexico. And then the third important rule that you should be aware of is called the Asylum Ban 2.0. And essentially this rule, it makes all individuals who enter or arrive at the southern border ineligible for asylum if they have transited through a country outside their country of origin. So all individuals are being impacted by this. I'd like to point out that for unaccompanied children, they typically there is a provision that should exclude them from being subjected to remain in Mexico, so they should not be sent back to Mexico. However, there have been reports that a number of children have been. And also in the interim final rule, or Asylum Ban 2.0, there is nothing in this rule that excludes children. Therefore, children will likely be impacted severely by this rule. It was also announced today that the transit ban rule would go into effect this week, but immigration advocates and experts, there's a lot of unknowns as to how this is going to play out. But what can be said is that the drop in the number of those individuals who have crossed our southern border is not due necessarily to a seasonal factor. There are these policies at play that are harmful, and they're placing a lot of children, women, families at great risk. They're at great risk of the extortion, the violence, the kidnappings. So that brings me to the next area I would like to touch upon, and that is children. So there's a few things here. It's becoming more and more evident that long-term detention is detrimental to a child's mental state. In fact, in September of this year, the OIG, or the Office of Inspector General for the Health and Human Services, published a report in September. This report related to mental health needs of children in the Health and Human Services custody, so ORR custody. So we're talking about different detention than being in the care of or custody of CBP or along the border. However, in both instances, whether a child is being held by CBP at the border or they're transferred out of there into HHS, the facts remain that children are deeply impacted by short-term detention, short and long-term, but I think the crucial point here is that there is now more of a recognition that children who are in detention, that there are severe impacts from this, and the longer children are detained, the lower their mental health state becomes. So they become more severely impacted with anxiety, with toxic stress, with regression in their verbal skills. So there's a lot of trauma and a lot of things that are the results of being detained. And the future outlook is, while we had a recent victory with the Flora settlement agreement, in terms of the fact that a court, Judge Gee, has just recently determined that the Flora settlement agreement should remain, and that the government's attempt to do away with the settlement agreement by instituting their own rule, that so children were seen to need those protections. The judge reaffirmed that children should not be detained for longer than 20 days. And all these provisions should be in place to help children. However, that's being said, and in spite of the most recent victory, there have been reports surfacing to suggest that in the future, children's rights are not so secure. There was recent reports by BuzzFeed about a new asylum rule that might go into effect. It hasn't yet, but it's just something that is being proposed by the administration, which would limit unaccompanied children's time frame for applying for asylum, whereas under the current law, children can apply for asylum. They're not time constrained. But under the proposed rule, if it should come down to that, if it is actually published by the administration, it would limit asylum applications to 2 months. So a child would have to apply for asylum in that short period of time, which is nearly impossible considering their age, the fact that they might not have all their documents to collect, and not enough time to collect all the information they need to defend themselves. So overall, the immigration landscape is constantly fluctuating. There's a lot of rules being introduced. There's a lot of policies. There's a lot of legislation. And so at any given day, the dynamics change. But for now, it looks as if Asylum is basically eviscerated at this point until all these rules and policies right now that have been in play are also being contested in court. So we're waiting for a lot of the courts to resolve these. So, but it is somewhat dismal. So giving hope to children in this time period and all others is the best and that we could do. And with that, I'm happy to take questions at the end, or happy to have any of you contact me directly for further information. And thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. And just a note that at the very end, there will be a slide that has contact information and for different people, and Hillary's contact information will be on that slide. So if you have specific questions related to anything she's talked about and the advocacy area, you will be able to contact her directly. We want to move on and talk about last year's Hope for the Holiday program, because that received incredible support. And in the midst of the pains of the world that we see, it's good to have things to celebrate, or at least to mark the ways that people like yourselves are responding and trying to be lights in the darkness and words of hope. So I want to introduce LIRS Program Manager for Migrant Services, Basel Mosley, to report on last year's campaign and to let you know why we continue the program this year. Thanks for joining us, Basel.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Hey everyone, thank you for joining this webinar today. As we just heard from Hillary, this past year has been very challenging and exhausting for many immigrant families living in our communities and seeking our nation's protection. While some families are being denied entry to our country or sent to Mexico, thousands of mothers and children are incarcerated and put in cold, isolated, inhumane detention. Policy after policy after policy, the most vulnerable amongst us are being torn apart from their families. The Hope for the Holidays campaign provides an incredible opportunity to bring hope to these families and others who are impacted by the immigration detention center system. While we enjoy a warm and wonderful time with our loved ones, thousands of families will spend the Christmas season in detention, separated from their friends and relatives, some even spending their second or third Christmas in these centers. On any given day, over 50,000 people are spending their nights alone, scared in these immigration jails. These are mothers, fathers, and children who used to celebrate Christmas every year and have dreams just like every one of us. Motivated by our compassion and love for the immigrant, the stranger, and the suffering, we call you to share the hope you have by joining us in our 5th year of the Hope for the Holidays. During the Christmas season last year, and through the help of many groups and the support of our wonderful volunteers, we were able to deliver over than 1,500 toys to detained children. In addition, we collected over 12,000 Christmas cards, which we sorted and delivered to our friends inside detention. And this includes the three family detention centers, the Carnes, South Texas Center in Delhi, and Berks Family Detention Center in Pennsylvania. Thanks to each one who wrote a card, to everyone who had given some of their time and energy to participate in this campaign last year. These are not only Christmas cards. Each card we send, each toy we deliver is a smile on someone's face, is a warm feeling, it's a hope. This year we are continuing our great tradition of writing cards and sending gifts to families in detention, to children who are placed in the foster care system, and to those who are separated from their loved ones. Together we can break the loneliness and the isolation and remind our brothers and sisters that they are not forgotten. For details on the card writing and the gift giving campaign, and for other ways you can stand in solidarity with migrants and refugees, I encourage you to visit our website, lirs.org/hope for the holidays. On this website, you will find the 2019 toolkit that provides a guide for hosting a card writing party, a link to donate for the purchase of gifts for children. You will find resources for sharing a meal with a newcomer, and of course, participating in advocacy to to let your legislators hear your opinions, and so you can show support for preserving family values. As we did last year, we are partnering with a local congregation in Baltimore to receive the cards. So please make sure to check out the address, which is available online on the website. Keep in mind that the deadline for donations for both gifts and cards is Friday, December the 6th. So Friday, December 6th is the deadline. Thank you for joining us today, and I encourage you all to roll your sleeves and let's get to work. Thank you. Back to you, Swanan.
Thank you, Basel. We are so grateful to all who participated last year, and you can see from Basel's report what a wonderful impact we were able to have, and you were able to have. So for just a moment, we want to bring these cards to life and this experience to life. And Michael and Rebecca Lawrence Whedon are going to share their story of delivering Hope for the Holidays cards to the Dilley Center in Texas last year. Welcome, Michael and Rebecca.
Thank you very much. We want to say thank you to LIRS for initiating this program and for all of the volunteers who make this program possible. It is a tremendous project.
In November of 2018, I was contacted by LRS about whether my congregation could be a point to receive cards and deliver a number of gifts to children in the South Texas Family Residential Center in Dilley, Texas. We recruited our son and the daughter of our other son to help us. And we made arrangements to deliver the gifts on Wednesday morning, December 19th. Now, the South Texas Family Residential Center is the largest family detention center that is run by ICE. It's managed by a for-profit private corrections company and has a capacity to house 2,400 women and children.
So we loaded up the truck with the books and the cards. There were 286 items and a 30-pound box of cards, and drove 85 miles to the most dismal place on the face of the earth. Dilley is located literally in the middle of nowhere. There are no trees, no houses. It was a bleak, dismal place with no resources.
Yes, we arrived on December 19th. Rebecca and I went inside through the main check-in area. At the security desk, we explained that we had brought the books and the cards for the women and the children for the chaplain's office. After a few minutes, they told us that the chaplain was not there. There had been a death in his family and he was gone, and the chaplain was the only one that could receive the packages. We persisted, and they made a number of phone calls and finally came back and said only the chaplain could receive the packages. It was a very large waiting area room there with plenty of space along the walls. We asked if we could leave the books and the boxes there. We were told no, we could not, that they could only be received by the chaplain and that we would have to try another time. So we went back to the truck, drove back to San Antonio. When we reached home, I emailed LIRS, letting them know what had gone on. I called the facility to see if there was any way that I could leave a message for the chaplain's office. The phone rang and rang and rang, but was never answered by a secretary or an answering machine.
While Michael was doing that, I got on my computer and I sent emails to every senator and congressman and congresswoman that I was able to access on their website, asking for help because I was very frustrated. That was on the 19th. On the 20th, I had not heard back from anyone, so I continued to send out emails, and I sent an email to Julian Castro because he is from San Antonio and he was kind of like my last hope. Well, shortly after he received my email, I received a phone call from Julian, and he was very outraged that they would not allow us to just drop the books off and the cards. So he said he was forwarding my email to his brother, Congressman Joaquim, and I would hear back shortly from Joaquim. Maybe an hour later, I heard back from Joaquim, who sent me an email saying he was forwarding all of my information to a woman named Alma Acosta. She is the executive director for the Hispanic Congressional Caucus in Washington, D.C. Shortly thereafter, I received a phone call from Alma Acosta, and she asked a little bit more about what happened when we went to try to deliver the books, and she said she would see what she could do. She followed through and she contacted numerous people and finally was in touch with an ICE representative, and she contacted me again, gave me all of the information, and people she had contacted said arrangements had been made. We were cleared to go. I just needed to present the instructions that she was given by ICE to deliver the items at the Dilley Center. And we were cleared for the entire week. Anytime we could go. So on the morning of December 24th,
We reloaded my son's pickup truck and went down to the detention center for the second time. We had been told to go to one of the sally ports that was manned by a guard. And we explained our purpose in being there. We had been given 2 contact people of ICE officials at the facility. He went and checked and told us that both of those people were gone for the week because it was the holiday. And he said they were not there to take possession of that. At this point, Rebecca began to get involved with him.
so I said we weren't leaving until the books were delivered. And I showed him all the information that I had, and he kind of hesitated. Then he went into the guard office and was there for some time. I don't know whether he was making phone calls or thinking about it, but he eventually came out and said we could put the boxes on the porch of the guardhouse. So Michael and my son started to do that, and I started to take pictures of them being placed on the porch, and I was told, you can't take pictures here. Well, I had to have some verification, so I did manage to get him to sign the information that I had been given, and he signed his name and the date, and we successfully deposited those items and made it back to San Antonio in time for Michael to robe and do the Christmas Eve service.
The guard was very polite. He did promise us he would find someone that would be able to take shipment and take delivery of those packages. Later on, after Christmas, I was able to call and did have a conversation with the chaplain, and he thanked us for delivering and told us that the women and children did have the books and the Christmas cards in their hands.
Also, during that time, I started sharing our story on social media, which became a very powerful tool we started becoming friends with people who were monitoring other facilities in Homestead and Teneo, and they were quite interested in our story. They soon learned about the stories of hope, the cards, LIRS, and that generated a lot of interest from many people who probably were kind of nonchalant, didn't really know what a detention center was. I also, after being on social media, received a phone call from a San Antonio Express newspaper reporter who wanted to do a story on our deliverance of the books and cards. And so I did a phone interview with her, and on Christmas Day, that was the front headline for the religion page in the San Antonio Express News. So the point of all of this is that the women and children who got those items, they will never know the Castros. They will never know who Michael and Rebecca are. They will never know any of the people that tried to help. But what they will know is that there are people who shared hope and love for people who were detained in the most disgusting, dismal place on the face of the earth. I want to leave this conversation with a quote. "Don't be discouraged. It may be the last key in the bunch that opens the lock." This was from the president and CEO of Martha's Table, a nonprofit in DC, which develops sustainable solutions to poverty. You can make a difference, and I think every woman and child understood that Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca and Michael. We talked about earlier about providing light in the darkness, but I also think we hear this story that you definitely were the salt of the earth in your efforts. And we thank you for sharing the story, but also for your persistence. And I hope that those of you who are participating in this webinar get a clearer picture, not just of the challenges for the migrants who are in detention, but the challenges that we have reaching out to provide hope to them, to minister to them, but also the potential to affect change by something as simple as delivering a card and making known to other people where that card is going and why we're doing it. And we don't, all of us need to have the same obstacles, and we are praying that we don't have those same obstacles this year in our delivery. But the sharing of the story, just as we go about this project, helps open up questions for other people and raises the situation of the detention centers for those with whom we share the story. So I want to turn it over now to Whitney Palmer, our program manager for migrant services, and she's going to take us through the nuts and bolts of participating in Hope for the Holidays this year and other action steps we can take.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. And thank you to Michael and Rebecca for sharing those powerful stories from your experience in last year's campaign. We truly appreciate your dedication to bring hope to those in need. As you heard from Hillary, Basel, Michael, and Rebecca, our immigration system is not kind to those who are in need. But during these challenging times, each of us has a unique opportunity to bring hope to those who are impacted by the immigration detention system. This year has been challenging, and we are uncertain of the future. We have an even greater need to bring hope. With so many families impacted by this system, we are even more motivated to write more cards and send more gifts to families in detention, children in foster care, and families who are recently reunited or who are still awaiting reunification from last year's family separation policies. Together, we can break through the isolation of our immigration system. So as each of us are preparing for this upcoming holiday season, we at LIRS would like to invite you to grab your friends, your family, and your community. You can write cards to families in immigration detention and to to the children who cross the border alone. You can donate through our Hope for the Holidays link on our website, and that donation will be used to send a Christmas card or a Christmas gift to children impacted by the immigration system. We also invite you to share a meal and invite a refugee or migrant from your community to your holiday festivities to remind them that they're welcome here. We also encourage you to write to your representatives and let them know that you want to see change in this system. As Basel mentioned, you can find all the information for card writing, donating, and organizing your card writing party on our website, lirs.org/hope. And again, as a reminder, the deadline for donations and card delivery is Friday, December 6th. Thank you so much for joining us today and for extending welcome in your communities and helping us spread hope this holiday season.
Thank you, Whitney. I want to open the floor now to questions. If there are any questions that people have that have not been submitted yet, you can go ahead and type those, and we will go through them as we receive them. Okay, I want to thank all of our panelists for participating in this webinar and sharing their knowledge and their encouragement. I want to thank all of you who've attended for joining and for the work that you are doing in your communities to support refugees and migrants. Just to note here on this slide that you see now, if you have questions about Hope for the Holidays, you can contact Whitney. If you have advocacy questions, Hillary, and for other information about reaching out educational tools for your congregation, you can reach me. I'm going to catch up here on a few questions that came in that split second while I was doing. Is there a program for the Berks Detention Center? Whitney, you want to take that about a relationship to Berks?
Yeah, so Berks is one of the family detention centers in Pennsylvania, and we do have a good relationship with them in that we are able to deliver cards and gifts during the holiday season. The other advocacy work around there's a advocacy group that gathers once a month for prayer vigils outside of the detention center. And are able to do some interaction with them. But the programs are limited in terms of access outside of Hope for the Holidays.
Okay, we also have a question about homemade cards versus store-bought cards. What do you think, Whitney?
Yes, we love all cards, and we especially love homemade cards. One of the important details, well, two important details about cards. We want to limit glitter and removable objects that can be seen as choking hazards. We'll have to filter those out. We do hand check every card with the help of our wonderful staff and volunteer team. And another really important note that's on our toolkit, all cards need to be sent outside of the envelope. So if you can save us some time and some energy and leave the envelopes on the side, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, and Whitney, what type of gifts are we looking for?
So we are looking for monetary gifts from our volunteers and donors because at the detention centers, there's a very specific list of what they can accept because there are a lot of rules in detention centers. If we can't have anything with batteries or strings. So we mostly buy books, and it's easiest for us if you can donate through the link on our website so we can follow the list of all the rules that the detention centers send us so we can ensure that each kid gets something special and age appropriate.
Okay, and how many detention centers are we hoping to send cards to this year?
Oh, that's a great question. So we have the 3 family detention centers that we send to every year. And we also have 11 wonderful detention visitation partners who are able to reach, I think about between 15 and 20 detention centers. And then we have a few of our other migrant services programs. So we'll be sending some cards to the border so we can reach those people. And we also send cards to our unaccompanied children program. So I think last year we sent them to over 50 groups of people.
Wow. Okay, and how should the cards be written? Do we have to write in Spanish? Can we write in English? What languages should we use?
So English and Spanish are really great. You can do a little bit of both. And on the toolkit online, we have some sample messages written in Spanish. So even if you're not fluent or conversational in Spanish, we do have some prompts for you.
And do we have any way of reaching immigrants who are not in detention, who also might need a lift this holiday season?
Yeah, so a lot of our detention visitation partners also do what's called post-release services. So after an immigrant is released from detention, we are able to stay in contact with them and help them get to what we call their final destination, or where their family is. And so oftentimes we're able to get cards to them as well. And we do have 2 other programs that LIRS is running that are support services for people out of immigration detention, and we'll be sending cards to them as well.
Can people who live near a detention center, an ICE center, actually take cards themselves or take gifts to the detention center themselves?
So it's a little bit tricky. We mostly work through our partners, like our visitation partners, because they already have a relationship with the detention centers. There's a training that's required, and there's a whole process, application process and background checks that people need to go through in order to have access to these facilities. But if you're interested in learning more about our visitation programs and how to get involved, you can reach out directly to me, Whitney Palmer. My contact information is on the screen, and I'd be happy to explore that with you.
We didn't talk about this in any of our actions, but do we ever encourage or actually organize vigils at detention centers?
Yeah, we have a great resource on how to organize vigils around detention centers, and that's on our website. But we mostly work through our partners. We have some really good grassroots organizations that are doing great work and often do prayer vigils. But again, if you're interested and don't know how to connect with a partner, you can reach out to me and I will get you connected to one of our many partners across the United States.
And here's just a note, and I will second this, and that is that some of the cards were made by children and quite simple, and they really were delightful. So I think that's an encouragement that we don't have to be Picasso's or Michelangelo's or any other great artists to create wonderful cards that are really appreciated. What's the best way to send monetary gifts if we don't do it online?
Yeah, so you can absolutely send a check to LIRS and in the memo write Hope for the Holidays. You can also do donations via phone. We don't have the information up here, but I can send that in our follow-up email. So you can donate online at lirs.org/hope. You can call our donation number, which is on our website, but I will also send it, or you can send it via check to LIRS with Hope for the Holidays in the memo.
Okay, and I just want to reiterate, I think I heard you say, Whitney, that the visitation programs, we send cards and deliver things to not only women and children, but also men, that it's not specifically just for children or families.
Yeah, and our visitation partners primarily work in adult detention centers because the women and children facilities that we have access to for this campaign, very, very hard to get into them to make visits. And so we actually don't have regular visitation partners that have access there. But we at LIRS are very lucky that we do get access to those facilities once a year to send cards and gifts.
Okay. When people ask about this program and about why we're doing it, what's the best way to answer questions about what types of people are in detention, the primary reason they're in detention? People are curious about this. What's the best way to give good information and clear information about who the people are that we are doing this for?
Yeah, we have some great information on our general website at lirs.org. And the most important thing to know about our friends that are in detention is they're people just like you and me who are looking for safety. They're looking for a better life for their family. And they just got caught up in this system that isn't really good and isn't really helping them. But if you would like more detailed information, you can check out our general website, lirs.org. And again, you can also reach out to me or Hillary as well. She has some great information on some more of the details.
And if people continue to ask questions, I will also say that from the outreach department, we have some good educational materials or studies that help people go a little bit deeper and understand some broader and deeper aspects of refugees and migrants. Is there a way that we can find out specific sites in California and Central California?
Yeah, we can definitely connect you. We do have a list of our partners, but if you want to reach out to me for specific regional questions, definitely send me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, and Hillary, could you describe or explain the difference between the presidential declaration, resettlement ceiling that was recently announced, and the asylum claims at the southern border?
Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, can you? Yeah, I think it's a question about the difference between the presidential determination for refugees versus the asylum claims at the southern border.
Sure. Well, the refugee system, it's a different system as opposed to the asylum system, although all asylees are technically refugees. So there is no cap as far as how many individuals should be allowed in to seek asylum. That is something that is a right. It's been enshrined. It's been a part of our system, our legal system. However, the refugee system is part of the 1980s Refugee Act, and that's how basically this act lines out the fact that the process for identifying how many refugees, the process of approving refugees. So it usually is announced, the State Department is in charge of making the announcement, the president, it goes through congressional consultation, and then in the end, the president will sign off. So typically the average has been about 95,000, although at its peak when Obama was in office, it was 110,000. Then it's just consistently declined throughout the years or since President Trump has been in office. Last year it was 35,000. And then, this year it's just been announced that proposed, nothing is finalized. So you might be seeing a lot of media reports, and you might see the number 18,000. However, it is the number that is being touted. However, there has been no final determination. So I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, and I think the difference when we're talking to people, and I get this a lot too, Hillary, is that number, the presidential determination, is for people who are coming through through the refugee camps, through the UN refugee camps. The people coming up, seeking asylum at the southern border, are not officially declared as refugees. So that number does not refer to them.
Right, right. The refugee system is decided, who a refugee is decided in refugee camps in outside of the United States. The asylum determination is made through the court system in the United States.
Okay. For post-release families, is there a way for people to sponsor post-release families and give them some support afterwards? Do we have a contact for that information, Whitney?
Yeah, I think if you can email me, and I will talk with the rest of our migrant services team, and we can get you connected to some more information. Once again, if you guys have some really specific information about ways to get involved in your community outside of Hope for the Holidays, definitely send me an email, and we'd love to get you connected. And yes, for Sue Ellen's email, that is my bad. Her email is correct. It's spots with 2 T's.
And can we provide a speaker to the church about this program?
Definitely depends on where you're located, but we'd be happy to provide, at the very least, some more information for you. So you can email Sue Ellen at spots with 2 T's at lirs.org, and we will provide you some more information.
Okay, can we share the donation links to people outside of our agency or in the community?
Absolutely. Please share as much as you can. Post on Facebook, post on social media, send it in emails, call your friends, call your family, tell everybody about this. Again, there's a huge need this year. We want to make sure that everybody who we can receives a card and a gift. And we greatly appreciate you guys sharing and donating and writing cards.
Okay, do we have an Amazon wish list that people can select directly from there?
We don't, again, because we buy gifts in such big bulk, and also because of the very limited gifts that people are able to purchase. So I, along with one of my other colleagues, spend about 3 days shopping on Amazon, which is a lot of fun, but also a big list. So we find it easier for us to do it that way rather than the Amazon wish list.
And is there any way, this kind of goes back to finding ways to sponsor post-release families, but is there any kind of wish list for post-release families or someone who manages that and can get items to people?
Yeah, so one of the great ways to provide support for our post-release families is to get connected to one of our detention visitation programs. As I mentioned earlier, they do have, a lot of them do post-release services and are always looking for donations and additional financial support for them. So you can email me or check out our list of detention visitation partners online at lirs.org.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for all of these wonderful questions. It shows me that you are thinking far and wide and making even greater connections than just holiday cards. And for that, we are very grateful, as are the migrants and asylum seekers and the detainees who you are reaching out to. I want to thank all of you for attending and for joining us, for the work that you do in your communities, for the way that you spread the word. We look forward to receiving all the great cards and Please be sure to contact us if you have any further questions or want to know how else you can get involved or have interests about any other aspects of refugee and migrant services. Thank you again, and go in peace.